بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيد الخلق رحمة للعالمين، سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Respected students, I welcome you all to our new course in which inshallah ta'ala we will be studying the discipline known as Fiqhul Lughah. Fiqhul Lughah, inshallah ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this course beneficial for yourself and for me. Bil khayri ya Rabbil Alameen. Today is our first session, and inshallah ta'ala, in today's session, we'll be studying some of the foundational concepts, some key terms, and the rest of the discussion, of course, will be based on many of the discussions that we will be having today. So today's lesson is of utmost importance. Now, before I begin with the topics, I would just like to confirm, can you hear me clearly? Is my voice clear, inshallah? طيب نعم الحمد لله. All right, excellent, جيد. So let's get started then, inshallah ta'ala. عفوا. No. Okay. Um, all right. Bismillah. طيب. Let's get started. So this is session one, inshallah ta'ala. Now, overall, as far as the course is concerned, we're going to have 20 sessions, inshallah ta'ala. Each session will range from 1 hour to a little bit. We might go over the hour. I'll try my best not to, but sometimes there might be certain discussions, uh, some detailed discussions due to which we might have to go above the hour a little bit. Now, the primary course text is Fiqh al-Lugha by Sheikh Muhammad Ibrahim al-Hamd. And that's the main text that you need to be reading from, inshallah ta'ala. And after each live session, I am going to share with you other resources as well to read from, bi'idhnillahi al-kareem. This course is the first installment, and inshallah ta'ala, we plan to have further courses covering works like As-Sahibi by Ibn Faris rahimahullah. That needs to be corrected on the slide. It's Ahmad ibn Faris, not Abu Ali al-Farisi. And Al-Muzhir by As-Suyuti, and Al-Khasa'is by Ibn al-Jinni rahimahullah, rahimahumullah jami'a. And there's other works as well that we would ideally like to cover. These are some of the more classical works on Fiqh al-Lugha, and we'll talk about their significance as well today, inshallah ta'ala. Now, the main questions and topics for this session, or the main things that we're going to discuss in this session are, number one, what is a language? When we say lughah, when we say language, what do we mean? And that leads us to another question, which is, what is a lahjah? And by lahja, we're referring to dialects. So what is a language? What is a dialect? What are the key differences between them? What makes, what is, why would we consider something a dialect and not a language? And so on and so forth. Then we're going to discuss some key linguistic terms, and there's three of them mainly: matnul lughah, ilmul lughah, and fiqhul lughah. These are the three terms that we want to understand, because at times there could be some sort of ikhtilat, or one could mix up these three terms. But what we mean by each of them is different. Then we'll discuss the beginnings of Fiqh al-Lughah, and finally, we'll briefly start our discussion on major theories on the origin of language, أصل نشأة اللغة, as it's referred to as in Arabic texts. And we'll continue our discussion on this last point in our next session, insha'Allah ta'ala. So starting off with the essentials. What is a language? Now, naturally, we're studying fiqh al-lugha, so we should know what is meant by lugha. What is lugha? A language, very briefly, is a set of sounds that people use to communicate, right? So when I'm speaking, if we go down to the smallest element, the smallest constituent of a language, right? If we break language down into its smallest component, which it is made up of, that's sounds. These individual sounds, we put them together to form words. And then those words, we put them together to form phrases and sentences, and then complete speech. And so when we use these sounds, words, sentences, speech to communicate, to express the meanings within us, that's language, right? Now, the word lugha, of course, linguistically is derived from the root lagha yalghu, which means speech. And the one of the earlier technical definitions of it are by Ibn al-Jinni rahimahullah. And to be honest, it's really fascinating that Ibn al-Jinni rahimahullah, there's much that he discussed about linguistics and philology, and we'll discuss these two terms shortly, inshallah. But there's much that he discussed about linguistics and philology, which later scholars, also adopted in their ideas. And I personally really like his definition of language, because generally any other modern definition that you'll see as well from most linguists, uh, it won't be too different from this. You might have some definitions which are more different than this, but usually, generally, the vast majority of definitions won't be too different from this. And it's an encompassing definition, right? أصوات يعبر بها قوم عن أغراضهم. Sounds by which each people express their intentions. This is the definition, the technical istilahi definition of lugha, which Ibn al-Jinni rahimahullah gives. Now, the core elements that you'll find in most definitions of language are, number one, that a language is sounds which are uttered, which are vocalized and articulated. Number two, that the goal, the wadhifa, the goal of language is to express intentions, internal meanings, meanings which are found in us internally. And these are the meanings that we want to express. That's the wadhifa, the goal, the job of the language. Number three, this is used by a group who understand each other through it or by it. And number four, that each people have their own distinct language. These are four core elements that you'll find in most definitions of language, whether those are more classical definitions or more modern definitions. Now, I've mentioned two other definitions here, which can help us further conceptualize the idea of language. One is by Edward Sapir, who's a famous linguist. He says that, and by the way, no language, no definition is free from i'tiradat, criticisms, right? And it just depends on how the other person views language, or what they think should be included or should not be included, and so on and so forth. But we don't want to get stuck in semantics, and we don't want to get stuck in some of these discussions which don't really have a lot of fa'idah behind them. We want to conceptualize what a language is, and then take it from there. So Edward Sapir, he defines language as purely human and non-instinctive, Sorry, just 1 second, Afwan. Um, the slides here are slightly okay. And now, Afwan, just give me 1 quick second. Um, okay, there we go. So Sapir, he defines language as a purely human and non-instinctive method of communicating ideas, emotions, and desires. Notice how Ibn al-Jini, for example, he just mentioned a general word, aghrad. So much can come under aghrad. طيب. So communicating ideas, emotions, and desires by means of a system of voluntarily produced symbols. These symbols are, in the first instance, auditory, and they are produced by the so-called organs of speech, right? So these symbols are, in the first instance, auditory. The asl is takallum. The default is speech. Writing is then based on speech. And as you know, those who have studied linguistics, writing came after speech. It's later in history that human beings started to write. They represented the sounds by using different letters, and then they started to write. So speech, takallum, kalam is the asl. Then Muhammad al-Nadiri, who has a very he has written an excellent book on Fiqh al-Lughah, and I shared this book with you as well when I shared the Drive link. It's in the primary sources or primary text for this course. He defines language as, he says, language is a general human phenomenon in all human societies, and it is made up of sounds organized into words, which are organized into sentences in order to express different meanings. This is also a very comprehensive and an excellent definition of language. Now, طيب. So that's language. Now, that's lughah, right? When we say lughah, that's what we mean. طيب. What about lahja? What is a lahja? Now, when we're saying the word lahja, we are referring to dialect. The English equivalent of lahja is dialect. And we can define a lahja or a dialect as a set of linguistic features specific to a particular environment shared by all individuals within it. طيب. So you'll immediately notice that this is something more specific than lughah. A lahja is more specific than lughah, and it's specified by the particular environment in which the lahja is spoken, right? So lahja or dialect is a set of linguistic features specific to a particular environment shared by all individuals within it, right? So this is a set of characteristics, features that distinguish an environment in its utterance, ada, how they utter words, and pronunciation, nutq, how they pronounce those words of the language, right? So you have مثلا people who speak Arabic from Sham, and then there are those who speak Arabic in the Khalij. Both of them, they have a distinct way of uttering and pronouncing words of the language. The distinguishing features, those specific characteristics and features are what we would refer to as lahja or dialect. So you can have a single language, and that single language can have multiple dialects depending on the regions and environments in which it is spoken. Now, these specific features which we're talking about, which can vary from one environment to another, from one region to another, these features, they're usually phonetic. in the vast majority of cases, they are phonetic. But they can also go to the level, to the lexical level or the syntactic level. What do we mean by the lexical level? We mean that a particular lahja has specific type of vocabulary words that it uses. And when we say syntactic features, we mean a particular lahja has particular grammatical features, which another lahja doesn't have. But the vast majority of what constitutes a lahja is differences in phonetic features. And dialects will be connected by a single standard language, and they will share a major common phonetic, lexical, they will share major common phonetic, lexical, and syntactic characteristics. Otherwise, if a dialect departs from the language in such a way that its vocabulary changes a lot, its syntax changes a lot, and so on and so forth, if the disparity gets to a level where these two have very different syntactic and lexical systems, then this lahja would then be considered a separate language altogether. So dialects, they will be connected by a single standard language, and they will share major common phonetic, lexical, and syntactic characteristics. Now, as I mentioned, dialect-based variations within a single language, they are usually related to phonetic features, like makharijul huruf, points of articulation, or characteristics of the huruf, sifatul huruf, the manner in which, the manner in which the sound is produced, other related characteristics as well. And as I said, these variations can extend to mufradat, vocabulary, and tarakib, sentence structures. Now, as the disparity between dialects grows in vocabulary, grammar, and other features, the difference could become so significant that we could consider them separate languages. It is also worthy to note that most languages have a standard Fusha version, and then under the Fusha, you have multiple dialects. So you have a Fusha standard version of a language, and then you have multiple dialects that come under it. It's also noted that most languages, and this is a very important point to note, and it's something which is quite fascinating. It is noted that most known languages, that's the key word there, right? Most known languages which split from earlier languages, they were originally dialects of the parent language. So there was a parent language, and then it had dialects, regional dialects, environmental features which were different, right? And then the disparity increased so much that these dialects came to be known, or these dialects became separate languages of their own. So it is mentioned by some linguists that most known languages which split from earlier languages were dialects of the parent language. Over time, differences between these dialects and the original language increased to the point that they became independent languages. And this can be seen in various language families. Yeah. And inshallah ta'ala, we are going to discuss, we are inshallah ta'ala going to talk more about language families in our coming sessions. Now, the Arabic language has had different dialects since the Jahili period. Arabic, al-Lughatul Arabiyya, has had different dialects since the Jahili period. Major Arab tribes each spoke their own distinct dialect. So you had the dialect of Quraysh, and the dialect of Tamim, and the dialect of Tay, and Hudayl, and others. But you'll notice this in classical works, no one says Lahjatu Quraysh or Lahjatu Tamim. They say Lughatu Quraysh, Lughatu Tamim. And this is discussed even in the books of Nahu. Open Ibn Hisham's works and other works of Nahu. They'll say that this is like this in the Lughah of Ahl al-Hijaz, and it's like this in the Lughah of Tamim. Now, what is meant by Lughah by classical scholars is lahjah. They don't mean that's a separate language. They don't mean that Quraysh spoke a separate language and Tamim spoke a separate language. The Ahl al-Hijaz spoke a separate language. No. When they say Lughah, they mean lahjah. So what's meant by Lughah in classical works is lahjah. طيب. Because in classical works, for language, they tend to use the word lisan. For language, they tend to use the word lisan. And for lahja, they tend to use the word lugha. So this is a daqiq point which should be kept in mind when you're referring to classical sources. When we are saying lugha, we are talking about independent languages. And when we are saying lahja, we mean dialects. But in classical works, what is meant by lugha is lahja. And what is meant by lisan is language. So keep that in mind as we move forward, inshallah ta'ala. Now, these are some of the examples of dialect variation amongst the Arabs. Like reading the noon. And you, by the way, those who have studied sarf or advanced sarf, and you studied qawa'id of sarf, or even if you studied sarf to an intermediate level, like something like irshad al-sarf, you'll remember that there are different rules covered under takhfifat of the mahmuz, and different rules covered even with sahih words and how to read them and pronounce them. Some of those rules go back to dialect variation. طيب. Like for example, here you have a vowel difference in reading the noon of nasta'in, either with a fatha or a kasra. Nista'in or nasta'in, either with a fatha or a kasra. You also have variations with hamza. Sometimes you read the hamza clearly, and sometimes you do tasheel, right? There's also variations in dialects in imala, and these are also represented within the qira'at Qur'aniyya, the Quranic recitations, right? So imala, and then imala is of different types as well. For those who study tajweed, right? And with imala, you sort of like slant the alif, right? So qada or qadi, right? And so on and so forth. There's also differences in dialects of letter positioning and order. Sa'iqa, saqi'ah, right? Within one word, right? And also gender treatment. Some dialects treat one word as mu'annath, others as mudhakkar. هذا البقر, هذه البقر. And then some dialects would read a particular word with idhar meaning that the letter is pronounced clearly. Muhtadun, see the ta there is pronounced clearly. Or with idgham, muhaddun, like that. These are dialectical differences, and they are you'll find many rules in the books of sarf. You open marahil arwah from the more advanced text, or irshad al-sarf, even ilm al-sigha, etc. You'll see different rules which are based on dialectic or dialect-based differences. Now, so that's the first two topics that we wanted to discuss for today. What is language, lughah, and number two, what is lahja, dialect? And inshallah ta'ala, I hope that we've understood the differences between the two. Now we're moving on to some of the key linguistic terms. And these key linguistic terms, they're important to understand for us to understand what we are dealing with and what subject we are really studying. The first term that we have is matnul lughah. Matnul lughah. And this is a relatively famous term. If you also, for example, ever search up, or if you've ever read about the different sciences of the Arabic language, one of the names that pops up is matnul lughah. And this is the discipline which is concerned with Arabic lexicology, right? What do you mean by lexicology? We mean vocabulary words and their meanings. طيب. So the discipline of the Arabic language, which studies Arabic words from the perspective of their meanings, that's matnul lughah. Matnul lughah. And the major works that come under this discipline are the Arabic dictionaries, ma'ajim, right? Lisan al-Arab, Taj al-Arus, Mu'jam Maqayis al-Lugha by Ibn Faris, and even contemporary and modern dictionaries. And you also have different types of works in Matn al-Lugha, for example, works correcting common mistakes, works written to help to give writers different types of synonyms for a given meaning, works written based on particular linguistic features, right? Like, for example, muthallathat. Muthallathat are those roots. Muthallath is a root, a madda in the Arabic language, in which the first and the first or the second letter can be read with either one of the three harakat, fatha or dhamma or kasra, like ghamr. So you have the madda, the root ghain, mim, ra. You can read the first letter ghain either with a fatha or a dhamma or a kasra. Ghamr, ghimr, ghumr. But in each of the cases, it has a different meaning. Ghamr means something, ghimr means something else, and ghumr means something different than ghimr. And there are scholars who have compiled works like these, like Qutrub. His muthallathat are famous. The muthallath of Qutrub. This also comes under matn al-lugha, and so on and so forth. So Arabic words from the perspective of their meaning, that's matn al-lugha. The second term that we have is ilm al-lugha. Now, classically, this term was synonymous with matn al-lugha. When you see scholars of the Arabic language saying ilm al-lugha, they mean matn al-lugha. When you read this term being used in classical books of Nahu and Sarf and books of Lughah in general, and these classical works in general, even today in Islamic circles, right? You'll see that the ulama, when they say ilm al-lugha, they mean matn al-lugha. But in modern usage, right, in a more there is a more technical meaning to ilm al-lugha as well, all right, in modern academia. And that is that when ilm al-lugha is said, what is meant by it is linguistics in a general sense. The study of linguistics, the nature of language, how language works, and so on and so forth. General ideas pertaining to language, not limited to any one specific language. It's linguistic, and that's what we refer to as linguistics, right? So there are scholars, when they say ilm al-lugha, they mean linguistics. So keep that in mind, inshallah ta'ala. The third term, which is the most important and the most relevant to us, of course, is fiqh al-lugha. Now, fiqh al-lugha is commonly translated as philology. But what do we mean by philology? Now, in German academia, when the word philology is said, or what is meant by philology as a discipline, is that is the study of literary texts as well as oral and written records in German academia, right? This is not what we mean by fiqh al-lugha. I'm going to explain that in a second, inshallah. In German academia, philology refers to the study of literary texts as well as oral and written records. In British academia, especially in the past, philology meant comparative linguistics, the study of relationships between languages. طيب. Now, classical Arabic scholars like Ibn Faris, they've used the word fiqh al-lugha. In fact, Ibn Faris is the first person to use the term fiqh al-lugha. And his book is the first book which bears the term fiqh al-lugha in its title. And when he used fiqh al-lugha, he meant the knowledge of words, their meanings, their categories, along with certain theoretical questions like the origin of language. So when Ibn Faris and other classical scholars used the term fiqh al-lugha, they were referring to the knowledge of Arabic words and their meanings, along with and their categories of Arabic words, along with theoretical questions like the origin of language. However, in modern Arab academia, and it is the classical works in Fiqh al-Lugha which laid the groundwork for the modern work in Fiqh al-Lugha, right? But in modern Arab academia, the term has expanded to encompass discussions of linguistics, the history of language, and related fields. So many Western and Arab, and so that's the philology or fiqh al-lugha in modern Arab academia. The term is expanded. It includes things that are discussed in linguistics, and it studies generally the Arabic language from many different angles. You know, the history of the language, the specific features of the language, different phenomenon within the language, and so on and so forth. And you also find different Western and then Arab scholars who treat linguistics and philology, or who believe that linguistics and philology are two synonymous terms. طيب. There are Western scholars that believe linguistics and philology are synonymous, and there are Arab scholars who believe that ilm al-lugha, meaning linguistics, and fiqh al-lugha, meaning philology, are synonymous because of the overlap between them. And there are others who distinguish between the two and say that linguistics is a separate discipline and philology is a separate discipline. There are Western scholars that say that, and then there are Arab scholars that say that. Now, the key differences which are highlighted are, number one, linguistics, ilm al-lugha, studies language as a human phenomenon, and it doesn't study a specific language, whereas philology studies a specific language. The second difference is that from linguistics, the goal is to understand the language itself and not something else through it. The goal is to understand how language itself works, overarching principles. Whereas the goal of philology is to study civilization, culture, and literature through the language. And point number three, discussions in linguistics are general to the point that they can apply to any language, whereas discussions in philology, they are more historical and comparative in nature. Right? So those who differentiate between linguistics, ilm al-lugha, and philology, fiqh al-lugha, they highlight some of these key differences. And this is a table in which I've summarized the two usages of the word ilm al-lugha. Classically, ilm al-lugha was synonymous with matn al-lugha, the study of Arabic words and their meanings. And in modern usage, it is the study of linguistics, not specific to any language, but the nature of language, how languages function and change over time, and so on and so forth. And in this table, I've summarized fiqh al-lugha and what is meant by it. So in Western academia, in German academia, it's the study of literary texts, oral and written documents. It encompasses literary criticism, etc., and other discussions. In British academia, especially older British academia, it was a discussion on comparative and historical linguistics, study the relationship between languages. And the Arabic world, fiqh al-lugha classically meant knowing words, their meanings, their categories, and these books that discuss fiqh al-lugha, they discuss some general theoretical discussions like the origin of language, for example. And in modern Arab academia, fiqh al-lugha is the study of the Arabic language from a historical perspective, its relationship with other Semitic languages, and its linguistic features. All right. Now, and of course, I've pointed to the fact that there are scholars who consider ilm al-lugha and fiqh al-lugha to be synonymous, linguistics and philology to be the same. And then there are those that mention those differences that we highlighted. Now, our definition, which we settle on, is this, and this is the one that I want you guys to remember. So when we say fiqh al-lugha, right? And of course, this is we haven't invented this definition. This is taken from credible scholars, and this is actually a definition given by Sheikh Muhammad Ibrahim Al-Hamd, and he discusses the problem in defining ilm al-lugha and fiqh al-lugha very briefly. Sheikh Muhammad al-Nadiri has a more detailed discussion on it in his book. And you can also refer to Subhi Salih's Dirasat fi Fiqh al-Lugha. He also highlights the problem there in differentiating between Fiqh al-Lugha and Ilm al-Lugha. But this is what we settle on, right? Fiqh al-Lugha is the study of language, and Arabic language in particular in our case, from the perspective of its sound system, lexicology, syntax, and the study of its special features and other topics related to it. It's a holistic study of the Arabic language and the different phenomenon found in it, whether those be related to its sound system or its words, lexicology, or its grammar, its word formation that would include sarf, its sentence formation, that's syntax, and its special features and other topics related to it. That's what we mean by fiqh al-lugha in our context. All right. And when we say linguistics and philology, this is so that you guys understand the difference between linguistics and philology, right? Linguistics is the and we can say ilm al-lugha is the broader study of language as a human phenomenon. In linguistics, you're not studying any specific language. You're studying language as a human phenomenon, and you're seeing how language works, how it evolves, etc. And of course, for that, you do look at features. You look at sound systems of languages. You look at the vocabulary, the etymology of languages, how words develop and change. And you look at the syntax of languages, how sentence structures develop, how grammar develops, and so on and so forth. But you're studying language as a human phenomenon. And then when you apply those discussions of linguistics to a specific language, right, whereby you're studying the morphology, the syntax, the sound system, the history of a particular language, that's philology, that's fiqh al-lugha. All right, so that's how you can understand the difference between ilm al-lugha, linguistics, and fiqh al-lugha, philology. Now, once we've understood that, once we've understood what we mean by fiqh al-lugha and what we will be studying the Arabic language from the perspective of its sound system. We'll be talking about its dialects. We'll be talking about its morphological features, word formation, etymology in the Arabic language, how words are produced and derived, how sentence structures work in the Arabic language, and so on and so forth. We'll be studying these different things related to the Arabic language in fiqh al-lugha, inshallah. Now, fiqh al-lugha, generally, these are the general branches of fiqh al-lugha, right? So when you're studying a language, you study it from these different elements. Number one is phonetics, right? And here I want you guys, as you're reading these English terms, I want you to think of their Arabic equivalents, right? So phonetics is the study of speech sounds, their articulation points, makharij al-huruf, their acoustic characteristics, sifat al-huruf. Now, what does this, where do we find these discussions in our Arabic works? In the books of tajweed. So this is ilm al-tajweed in essence, right? Classically. And in modern times, of course, a new science has developed, which is ilm al-aswat, phonetics, right? But the foundation of ilm al-aswat is ilm al-tajweed, right? So when someone is studying tajweed, of course, they're doing it mainly to recite the Quran properly, but they're studying the phonetic features of the Arabic language. How letters are produced, what are the different characteristics of those letters, and so on and so forth. Then we have phonology. And phonology is the study of sounds in relation to their function within a language, right? That's phonology. And then there is a difference of opinion as well, because there's a lot of overlap between phonetics and phonology. But the main thing is phonetics studies articulation points, how sounds are produced for themselves, whereas phonology studies sounds in relation to how they function in a language, right? Or if a change of the articulation point would lead to the change in meaning, and so and other similar discussions. So there is a fine line between phonetics and phonology. Then we have lexicography and lexicology. Now you do have phonological discussions in ilm al-ishtiqaq, right? In works of ilm al-ishtiqaq, where they'll mention that, these combination of letters, they give this meaning, right? And so on and so forth. So you will have some phonological discussions in ilm al-ishtiqaq. Then you have lexicography or lexicology, and this is the study of words and their meanings. Now, academics sometimes specify lexicography with compiling dictionaries, and they mention lexicology as the broader study of words. Now, so lexicology, that's words, and that's the science of matn al-lughah, the discipline of matn al-lughah. Then we have morphology, which studies the structure and formation of words. That's ilm al-sarf. We have syntax, which is the study of how words are arranged to form sentences. That's nahu. And then we have semantics, which is the study of meaning in language. And semantics studies meaning at word level, at sentence level, and so on and so forth, right? So, for example, a semantic discussion would be alfaz mushtaraka, right? You have one word, which has multiple meanings that it alludes to. Or adudad. Adudad are those words in Arabic which can mean the opposite. The same word can mean both the opposite meanings. And so on. And then semantics, you have semantics related to sentences as well. But semantics simply deals with the study of meaning in language. And in Arabic, the equivalent of it is what we call ilm al-dalala. And it's in Arabic, the Arabic discipline of ilm al-dalala is more focused on words and the relationship of words in terms of meaning. So you have alfad mushtaraka, like you have the word qur, which can mean tuhur and hayd, both. Either one of them. It can mean tuhur or hayd. And then, other such words, right? That's semantics or ilm al-dalala. Then we have pragmatics, which is the study of how language is used in context, including implied meanings and speaker intentions. We have balagha. There are elements of semantics and pragmatics covered within the books of balagha. Then you have stylistics, which is the study of stylistic features of language, such as those found in poetry, prose, and other literary forms. And then there are elements of different stylistic features which can be covered in balagha, and then those which you uncover by the study of adab, and so on and so forth. So these are the key branches of fiqh al-lugha and the perspectives from which the language would be studied. And so you see, it's a very broad field. Now, after that, how are different topics presented in fiqh al-lugha? And these are the different methods, right? So you have 4 methods of presenting, examining, studying linguistic phenomena. The first is what we call the descriptive method, or al-manhaj al-wasfi. And this approach involves observing and analyzing linguistic features and phenomenon as they naturally occur. Observing and analyzing various linguistic features and phenomena as they naturally occur. And the aim here is to accurately describe the structure and usage of language. And this can be done at the sound level, the word level, the sentence level, right? The main aim is that you observe these structures and you want to describe these structures and the usage of language there. So that's the main goal there with the descriptive method. With the historical or tarihi method, al-manhaj al-tarihi, This method will examine the development and evolution of linguistic features over time. Now, it will trace historical changes in a language, and so on and so forth. And the researchers, they want to understand how and why certain forms or usages shift. Etymology or ishtiqaq is a good example of this, right? Where you study the origins of words. Then you have the comparative method or al-manhaj al-muqarin, and this involves a systematic comparison of two or more languages, and you're trying to identify similarities and differences in structure, vocabulary, usage, right? And it is used often to trace relationships between languages and to study language families. And then you have the general method, al-manhaj al-aam, and in this approach, the researcher wants to derive broad universal principles that apply to language in general. And this is achieved by studying multiple languages, identifying patterns where there's agreement, patterns of divergence. And the aim is to uncover underlying rules or tendencies which are shared by human languages. So these are the different methods. And most of the work which is done in Arabic is wasfi. Not to say that there's no work is done which is tariqi or muqaran or am, but most of the work that is done is wasfi in its nature. Now, طيب, here I've listed the different topics that are covered in the books of fiqh al-lughah in general, right? Modern works. Earlier works discuss some of these topics, right? Modern works tend to study all or most of these topics with some variations, right? So one of the major topics is debates regarding the origin of language and differing opinions on that particular issue. Now, the origin of language, this is discussed in a separate discipline known as ilmul wad' or the study of coinage, word coinage. Ilmul wad' it mainly seeks to understand the philosophy behind how words are coined in the Arabic language, or the philosophy behind word coinage in general in the Arabic language. And this is a science that came later on, right? Abdul al-Iji, rahimahullah, has a work on it. And then there's a modern work by Sheikh Abdul Hamid Antar al-Azhari, rahimahullah. And inshallah ta'ala, the plan is that we want to study ilm al-wada' as well. It's a very fascinating science. And it's very beneficial for those who want to interact and engage with higher level texts in Nahu and Sarf, engage with the Hawashi and the glosses, classical glosses, because they do include the discussions of from ilm al-wad'. And it's also relevant to the discussions in mantiq, right? Or classical Arabic logic. Now, where did language come from essentially? Now, the second is characteristics of the Arabic language, right? Its unique features, and these are called khasa'is al-lugha. So you have, first of all, aslu nash'at al-lugha, and then you have khasa'is al-lugha. There's some scholars that prefer to use the term simatul lugha, because to say that something is specific to the Arabic language, this is a specific feature of the Arabic language that requires an in-depth study of other languages as well. Now, then we have understanding the linguistic practices of Arabs and their styles and expressions. That's a big part of fiqh al-lugha. We have the study of phonetics, the general overarching principles of phonetics in Arabic. And this is studied in more detail in ilm al-aswat. And then you have Arabic dialects and their variations, general ideas pertaining to them. Then the structure of general ideas pertaining to the structure of Arabic words and the Arabic sentence construction, meanings and significance of words, and the development or decline of their meanings. Right? Now, of course, each of these will further branch out into a separate science. Not necessarily each and every one of these, but some of these would branch out. So phonetics would branch out into tajweed and ilm al-aswat. And you'll have to access those works to understand the complete details, but you'll get a starting point here from fiqh al-lugha, right? Likewise with sarf and nahu. and then with ilm al-dalalat as well. Then we have derivation and word formation, which is ilm al-ishtiqaq in its essence, right? Arabization, how we Arabize words, and the rules of Arabization, which is called ta'rib. One of the most important discussions covered in the books of Fiqh al-Lughah is Arabic dictionaries, their schools and their methodologies. It's very important for a student of knowledge to learn, to know the different manahij that different lexicographers have followed and different dictionaries have followed, so that he can benefit from those dictionaries appropriately. Then you have the issue of language purification, tanqiyat al-lugha, and the challenges facing Arabic, and the plots against it, right? There is a ghazw thaqafi that has been ongoing since colonial times, to promote regional dialects and to demote al-Fusha, because that's what connects the Arab world. Fusha, the standard version, is what connects the Arab world. Their i'lam, their institutions use Fusha, and in their everyday life they use their dialects. But it's the Fusha that connects them. If you break that connection, the Arabic world breaks apart. Now, then you have adapting Arabic to modern developments and incorporating new terms, medical terms, legal terms, other technical terms, right? That's discussed in Fiqh al-Lughah. Also, contributions of scholars in the past and the present in preserving and developing the language. Also, debates on promoting colloquial Arabic, as I mentioned, the modern Arabic dialects, and abandoning i'rab, grammatical inflection, the reformations of Arabic script. You see many such scholars calling towards leaving i'rab, leaving off grammar, and other discussions, right? And then focus on studies conducted by linguistic academies, their outcomes, and so on and so forth. These are some of the general discussions covered in the modern works of fiqh al-law. Now, moving on to our next topic, which is early human interest in language. And this is a precursor to trying to understand how the sciences of the Arabic language developed and how fiqh al-lugha in particular became an independent discipline. Right? So, of course, human beings, they've been interested in language since ancient times. Many civilizations and people devoted attention to language, its phenomenon, its phenomena, its issues, and so on and so forth. You have Indians in ancient India studied phonetics, the sound system of their language. You have earliest surviving work. You have earliest works dating back to 5th century, before the Common Era, right? There's also compilations of dictionaries. The Greeks compiled dictionaries before the Common Era, right? And then you have other civilizations like ancient Egyptians, Chinese, and others who showed interest in language and the workings of language. The Hebrews, their main studies in language and linguistics started after the rise of Islam. Now, linguistic studies in Europe until the late 18th century, European linguistic research focused mainly on two languages, Greek and Latin. Then you had the discovery of Sanskrit. Sir William Jones deciphered Sanskrit, and then he talked about its connection to Greek and Latin. And this led scholars to study similarities amongst languages using a comparative approach. And there was also this idea of trying to find the first language, right? Now, some European linguists advocated ignoring metaphysical questions about language origins and to focus on studying the language itself. What do you mean by metaphysical questions? Like, what's the first language and the origin of language and so on and so forth? Because there is a metaphysical element to them, as you will see, inshallah, when we discuss that, right? So they advocated just focusing on studying on the language itself, and this gave rise to modern linguistics, which has defined methods and areas of research. Now, as far as Arabic is concerned, right, Arabs mainly focused on poetry and oratory before Islam. They preserved their language and they considered mistakes to be, something that was shameful. You had famous eloquent speakers and poets. You had poetry competitions in Arabic markets, and so on and so forth. Their intellectual legacy was their linguistic prowess, essentially, right? The Arabs. The systematic study of the Arabic language and grammar, however, this started after the advent of Islam, right? And earlier efforts, they included explaining uh, unfamiliar Quranic words. Now, there's no word in the Quran which is unfamiliar in and of itself, but there are words that become unfamiliar to people, right? So you have discussions, for example, between Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu an and Nafi' bin al-Azraq on such words as mentioned by Imam al-Suyuti in al-Itqan. And you also have early attempts at codifying grammar, which are mainly attributed to Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali radiallahu an, as mentioned by Ibn Nadim in his Fihrist, al-Fihrist. Now, there are those, of course, who attribute the codification to Ali radiallahu an, and you have different narrations pertaining to that, but that's a different discussion, right? Now, all right. The next topic is efforts in Arabic language compilation. So the 2nd century is of particular importance, right? It marks the beginning of significant scholarly activity in collecting and authoring works on the Arabic language. Because many non-Arabs entered into Islam, this led to the spread of linguistic errors amongst the speakers of the Arabic language. So, as a response to preserve the Arabic language, linguists started to devote themselves to recording the Arabic language. They traveled to the desert and to Bedouin regions, to the Arab, where there was minimal contact with city life, right? And there they learned the language directly from Arabs, and they documented it carefully. Imam Shafi'i, for example, is mentioned in his biographical works that he would, study Arabic on the outskirts, with the people with the on the outskirts of the cities, right, to learn the proper Arabic language, right? And he's considered hujjah in language. Many linguists emerged during this period, and they compiled and codified Arabic. Some of these scholars, their focus was codifying grammatical principles. Others, their focus was codifying Arabic words and compiling them, writing them down. Like Al-Asma'i, for example, is known more famously as a Lughawi than a Nahwi. Lughawi in the sense that he was more engaged with Arabic words, right? And Sibawayh, rahimahullah, is known more as a Nahwi because of his engagement with grammatical principles. So you have Abdullah bin Ishaq al-Hadrami, Isa bin Umar, Abu Amr bin al-Ala, Al-Khalil bin Ahmad al-Farahidi, Umar bin Uthman bin Qambar, who's Sibawayh, well known, Yunus bin Habib, Al-Kisai, Nadr bin Shumail, Al-Farra, Abu Ubaidah, and so on and so on. Al-Asma'i, Abdul Malik bin Qarib, Al-Asma'i, and so on and so forth. You see, this is all the 2nd century, early 3rd century, and so on and so forth. Now, and these early linguists, they wrote numerous works, each following their own method of organization, right? So some grouped words under a single category, like words related to wuhush and swords, suyuf and nakhl, trees, nakhl, palm trees, right? Others organized books into multiple chapters covering various topics. For example, you have books on the Hamza, right? Words which contain Hamza, and then books on Adad and so on and so forth. Books on rare words. Of course, again, the Quran and Hadith don't use words which are rare in and of themselves, but these are words which become unfamiliar to people. So this led to the discussions, or led to the compilation of works on Gharib al-Quran and Gharib al-Hadith. And these are some of the earlier works compiled, right? So there's works by Al-Asma'i, by Abu Zayd al-Qurashi, his Nawadir, and غريب الحديث by Abu Ubaid bin Qasim al-Sallam, معاني القرآن by Al-Akhfash, and so on and so forth. And most of these works were produced in the 2nd and 3rd century, and they were based on reliable oral sources, and then they were compiled in a precise and descriptive fashion. And this collected material, this became the foundation for later linguistic sciences of the Arabic language, including Nahu and Sarf and Matn al-Lugha and so on and so forth. And after this period, linguists generally relied on existing collected material and built rules based on it. Now, there's two works which are especially worthy of being mentioned because these are monumental works. These are monumental works as far as the study and compilation of the Arabic language is concerned. First, the first of them is Kitab al-Ain by Imam Khalil bin Ahmad al-Farahidi. And this is the first Arabic lexicon, the first ever Arabic lexicon organized based on Makharij al-Huruf. And this work was so sophisticated that Orientalists falsely claimed that it was copied from earlier civilizations. Right? Khalil bin Ahmad al-Farahidi was an absolute genius. He's um, the one who developed the science of al-arud wal-qawafi, Arabic prosody and rhyme. And then he wrote the first Arabic dictionary as well. And there's stories about him, trying to taste each makhraj to pinpoint where each letter is articulated from, and so on and so forth. Now, and then you have the Kitab by Imam Sibawayh. And the Kitab by Imam Sibawayh is so much more than a work of Nahu, right? On a work of syntax, right? It contains, of course, rules of syntax and also sarf morphology. It also discusses phonetic features towards the end of the book. And it even discusses works on balagha. And those discussions became the foundation for later works on balagha. And this work was highly praised by Ibn al-Jinni as much as others. Al-Kitab by Imam Sibawayh, right? This is the foundation of Nahu and Sarf and later disciplines. Now, so these are some of the earlier works, and the two monumental works are those. And these were preparatory efforts. Of course, Kitab by Sibawayh was not just a preparatory effort. It was, and to this day remains, a comprehensive Nahu resource. Right, and it was preparatory in the sense that after it, different independent sciences started to merge. So Nahu became separated from Sarf, and Balagha was separated, and so on and so forth. And they laid the foundation for systematic grammar, lexicography, phonetics, which would be developed in the coming years. Now, Fiqh al-Lughah as an independent discipline. Fiqh al-Lughah as an independent discipline starts to develop later. So the 4th century is also of particular importance. It's at that time period where many dictionaries were now authored, right? So scholars of the Arabic language, they continued to write on various topics. You have many other works that were written, works specific to sarf, and so on and so forth, and works on nahu and so on and so forth. But the 4th century Hijri was marked by the compilation of many important dictionaries: Ibn Durayd's Jamhara, Al-Farabi's Diwan, Al-Qali's Al-Bari', Al-Azhari's Tahdhib, Al-Jawhari's Sihah. And during this period, you also had works on qira'at, nahu and sarf, and Arabic phonetics written. طيب. But Fiqh al-Lugha formally starts to develop with Ahmad ibn Faris, rahimahullah, who's also an author of a dictionary, Mu'jam Maqayis al-Lugha, one of the most authoritative dictionaries of the Arabic language, one of the best dictionaries of the Arabic language. Ibn Faris wrote the first book with the title Fiqh al-Lugha. It's called As-Sahibi fi Fiqh al-Lugha, right? And his book discusses some of the topics which are at the heart of some of our discussions in Fiqh al-Lugha, like the issue of Aslu Nash'at al-Lugha, the origin of language as well, for example, right? But of course, these didn't discuss all of the topics that you will now that you will now find in modern works of fiqh al-lugha. The second most important figure in the development of fiqh al-lugha as a subject is Abu al-Fath bin al-Jinni, طيب ibn Jinni rahimahullah. And his work Al-Khasa'is discusses many topics from within fiqh al-lugha. His work Sirru Sana'at al-I'rab does so as well. And Ibn al-Jinni he's from the time of Al-Mutanabbi, and he is one of the most important figures in as far as the technical sciences of the Arabic language are concerned. His works are very, very important. Then you get Al-Tha'alabi with his Fiqh al-Lugha. Now, Tha'alabi's work is actually a dictionary, but it has in it discussions which are from Fiqh al-Lugha. But in actuality, Tha'alabi's work is a dictionary. It's not an independent work on Fiqh al-Lugha, but it has in it discussions which are from the discussions of Fiqh al-Lugha. Then Ibn Sida's Al-Mukhassas is also a dictionary which contains discussions on Fiqh al-Lugha. And Al-Jawaliqi's Al-Mu'arrab also does. So this is essentially, this laid the foundation for Fiqh al-Lugha as an independent discipline. Then you get As-Suyuti with his Muzhir, which is an encyclopedia covering various disciplines related to the Arabic language, and has numerous discussions on Fiqh al-Lugha. And after that, you have modern works. Muhammad al-Khidr Hussein al-Tunisi's works, Mustafa al-Rafi'i, his Tarikh Adab al-Arab, he discusses topics of Fiqh al-Lugha in the first volume. Dr. Ibrahim Anis, Ali Abdul Wahid Wafi, Dr. Abdul Rajihi, Ramadan Abdul Tawab, and others. There are others, and more names are mentioned in the main course text, Fiqh al-Lugha by Dr. Muhammad Ibrahim Alhamd, and you can refer to that, insha'Allah ta'ala. طيب, I briefly want to introduce the next topic, which is the origin of language, but inshallah ta'ala we'll deal with this bi'idhnillah al-kareem in our next session. This is the first topic that we're going to discuss from within the topics of fiqh al-lugha, the origin of human language, right? This is a topic which has fascinated thinkers throughout the ages. Where did language start? How did it start, and so on and so forth. And many scholars, philosophers, linguists, they've investigated this issue and they've proposed a number of theories. There are four which are most well known. The first is the theory, the Nadariya of Tawqif and Ilham. And then you have the Nadariya of Tawadu' and Istilah. And then you have the Nadariya of Taqlid and Muhakah. And you have the Nadariya of Gharizat al-Kalam. And inshallah ta'ala, we're going to talk about these in more detail, inshallah ta'ala, in our coming session. Now, it is important to remember that none of these theories have conclusively been produced, because there's a metaphysical element to them. They're speculative, right? And that's why modern linguists don't tend to talk about this at all. The Linguistic Society of Paris, decided not to discuss or accept papers on the topic, right? Because there is no definitive evidence for any of the theories. But inshallah ta'ala, in our coming session, we'll talk about different scholars who've espoused different views. Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari rahimahullah, Ibn Faris and Ibn al-Jinni themselves, the view that they held, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, and other scholars. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll refer to Western scholars as well, and the views that are espoused there, inshallah ta'ala. So we'll discuss this, but this is just to get you acquainted with the discussion on the origin of language. But you should know that these are theories and none of them have been proven definitively. So with that, inshallah ta'ala, we will, wrap up our discussion for today. This was the first session, so these were some of the introductory points which were important to understand. And if there are any questions now, I'd be happy to take them, insha'Allah ta'ala. So, Habibi Abdul Qadir, Muhammad Aslam, do you have any questions pertaining to our session, pertaining to Fiqh al-Lughah? Inshallah ta'ala, Bidnillah al-Kareem, I will be mentioning, inshallah ta'ala, the pages that I recommend that you read from the main textbook for this week to revise some of the concepts that we've covered. And inshallah ta'ala, I'll be sharing some additional resources as well to refer to Bidnillah al-Kareem. Inshallah. And then, while you're reading those resources, if you get any questions, feel free to message me in the group, inshallah ta'ala. طيب, we'll wrap it up then, ikhwan. I'll see you guys next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.